but it looks like it's closer to the house. Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you. All right.
Okay. If the boat is under shelter, it can be in the front yard.
That was my.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to make the back side of it. It's not my day. I need that back. I have to make the back side of it.
Yeah. Oh, I just.
I've been writing grants all day.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Okay. I just don't want to call in until I have some kind of good information.
It's gotta have two sides. If you only have one side.
Yeah.
We don't need to go home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So happy
We just had it.
75 extras in it, so it's
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, is there additional, you know, 6 feet in?
Oh, there's, oh, that we haven't, and we haven't, oh, I'm sure, and we haven't updated so many of them. You update them as they come up, and that's all you can do, really.
That's what the one.
I mean, they want 45, and every time that comes up, it's exactly.
That's what you did. Well, yeah, so as far as you can tell, it has been moved back to the house and what it was originally.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, if it, as far as you know, as far as if there's a boat that's in the front yard.
I'm bringing it back. Let's go give you one sided. You'd have been lost.
Got as much drywall as I
Yeah,
thought, so
and
I
it
thought.
is. Yeah, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Down some short.
It was just sitting out there. This is
I think that you're the one in the.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she is a horseback. Oh,
I
that's.
have, well, that's what I wrote last time. You want that? Yeah.
That's really good.
That's a much better solution.
I think actually she was trying to be a voice for her.
Was it?
And she was being,
It looks really good. Now, I'm afraid I can't pull that.
kind of drippy instead of being like. But I think it all started out because she was trying to help.
I knew exactly what.
He walked in that investigator's office with me when we were talking about how to mitigate that water good, and he could smell.
Thanks for the packet. I did review it.
I already put the part of
Now that's the damn thing there.
Okay, down it goes.
Now I'm after the car leaves, you wouldn't have been on there.
Oh, I know, and some, I've worked in retail for a lot of years. And, but here's sometimes you just can't. Sometimes you gotta do what you don't wanna do, and then you go in the back and yell at us.
I have lots of room.
all day long.
I have lots of room.
And WJ when he had oral surgery. Oh, Gary had chance of late meeting.
Oh, gosh.
So everybody's,
Everybody else better be here.
yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, I don't know that we would. The other thing is, how many times have we driven down the street and seen a boat in, you know, and you look at my house. I'm just sitting back there, that's my back of my house.
Yeah.
See, that's, but not everyone realizes that. That could be a concern.
Did you write the job
from
description?
some people
Who
because
wrote
it's
it?
supposedly, they think that's the.
Is that when you?
Exactly. I mean,
I was just curious who wrote it. How are you this evening?
Oh, doing pretty good. How are you, Danny?
Oh, better than I deserve.
I do.
And I just think, you know, I have been around
That works.
for
In the-
20 plus years and been nice to pay for some of our, I'll leave that.
And you don't know if it's there for,
I'll leave it there.
yeah, and you don't know if it's there for finance or.
Okay, thank you.
You know, it may be they just came by to elect and they have to do
It's okay, I ran, yeah, I'm familiar with it.
That's why I'm saying.
That's okay, I'll call
I
on.
know that, I know it, but see, that's what I was.
I just, I knew it was on there and normally I follow up, but I didn't have
Be
time
able
to
to
call today,
really
so
follow up.
I'll call on you
really
to
well,
update us
or,
and we'll
yeah,
go from
because
there.
that's gonna happen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
the same thing as the.
Mr. Riding was once Mr. Riding was.
Of the alley. I don't know, God, I don't know. If you know anything about Sheriff Bruce?
I just talked to you.
Value of her neighborhood. Yeah, exactly.
I can see why. I can see why.
It ain't bad.
Oh, I know that. And
I walked in there a few years ago, got mine.
way too good for
And
that.
the first person that sees Mary Lou Roberts.
I got married, it's supposed to do it 51, oh, and 57, I did mine last fall. There wasn't much to it, if I'd done that, I'd have done it earlier. It's just the fear and the
Oh,
thought.
yeah.
Then she got them in, she's about 8 months pregnant. She said,
All right, it's 6 o'clock. I don't think any need for the gavel this evening. Here at Tuesday, June the 12th, time for our regular city council meeting. We'll call it to order. I'd ask we all rise. And I don't see our Pastor Akins here this evening, so I'll lead us in an invocation. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this opportunity once again to come together as a community and as a council. We pray that the actions that we would take here this evening and the conversations that we would have would be honoring to you and would lead to the best outcomes for the largest number of citizens in our community and our region as possible. We continue to pray for all those who are overseas serving our country and any of those who are sick or troubled. In our mighty Savior's name, amen.
Amen.
Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk Hunziker, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Hughes. Here. Alderman Curry-Witzman. Alderman Brown. Alderman Voss.
Here.
Alderman McComb. Alderman Urbis.
Here.
Alderman Bratton.
Here.
Alderman Bastian.
Here.
Alderman Campos.
Here.
Alderman Pittman. Mayor Stevens.
Present. Okay, thank you everyone for your attendance this evening. The first item here that I have on the agenda, I'm going to have to hold over until our next meeting. There is a group from the Kiwanis Club who I had scheduled to be here tonight, but they are not going to be able to be here until our next meeting, so we'll handle that presentation then. That takes us to the consideration of council minutes from May the 29th, 2018, included in your packet, and I'd entertain any amendments or questions on the minutes at this time. I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Up next, we have the consideration of accounts payable, receivable, and payroll registers. We have one list with one item, and of course the other list, which is more lengthy, and I'd entertain any questions on the bills. I have a few myself, but I'll, Ms. Campos?
Thank you. List 678 and page 3. Soil sampling, and that is field and technical services for $1,400.
That was soil sampling in and around the Kerwood facility that I commissioned to be done in order to try to wrap up the deal with Solar Alliance.
Next one, page 4. Illinois Department of Transportation, $37,119.81. Bike trail fund.
That is money that's going to be reimbursed from Joe Capias for the development of the bike trail between Murphysboro and Carbondale.
Okay, thank you. This is a weird one, but page number 6, Key Equipment and Supply Company, gutter brooms,
I think that,
street department.
That's the big room on the side of the street.
Well, that's what I thought, so. Like I said, I haven't reported a penny yet.
Good thing I don't have any.
Yeah, and then there is one on page number 12. Annual maintenance, Roger, Hediger,
That's the,
$3,000.
Programmer for our police department software package, which we pay them every year.
what are we getting for our annual maintenance?
Basically 24/7 support.
Okay,
They're very, very responsive.
good.
And we have lots of stability issues. It's not their doing, and they're on it like that.
Good.
I think that's about it for me. Thank you so much.
All right. Ms. Hughes?
I've got most of mine answered, but If we go to that same register on 678 on page 16, it's the rights one. Down at the bottom, there's a lot of plywood. Is that for, and that's under building and grounds, but is that for, more for code office? Do you
Darren, I know you did a lot of that
Oh,
remodel.
109.
I wouldn't think,
Some of it is, and some of it is, it's like a little awning we built over at the water tower where Tim has to
Okay.
post
Oh,
something about the
okay,
water
yeah, I
quality
knew
issue.
that there was,
Okay.
that
Quite
you
a
did
few,
that.
quite a bit of that was.
Yeah, okay.
That was cool.
All right, and then on page 10, this is just an observation, but when I was talking with Leslie, there's a tractor repair for John Deere from Power Clan. I guess they come maybe out of St. Louis or further, I don't know, but $822 of this was labor, and $360 was for mileage, and the part was $20.56. That bothers me a little. I don't know if there's not anyone closer that can
it's a good point, Barb. I
work
mean,
on those or what. And if there isn't, that's one thing, but that's just a lot of money for a $20 part.
do we know which,
That's wastewater treatment.
Okay.
5104 is wastewater treatment.
I don't know about that, but that's the backhoe that Jim Stewart said that they're spending probably $2,500, $3,500 a year, every year at least on.
I think if we're spending that
And
much
he
on
said,
it,
you know, I don't
why
need a new backhoe. I think I've brought this up before.
Yeah.
We don't need a new backhoe, that's for sure, but we're gonna have to have something, or we're gonna continue to do that, and it's just
Well,
gonna get
and
worse.
perhaps we have to get someone from that far to do it. I don't know. It just seemed like a lot for,
would you like us to hold that bill?
I think they, they've done their work, they need to be paid, don't get me wrong. I just think it's something we might want to look at some point when it needs repair again, about if there's anyone closer maybe. If we could save $300 on travel, why not?
Yeah, very good point.
I'll talk to Mr. Stewart
Yeah.
about that. He couldn't be
And-
here tonight, but
That's fine.
if you'd like for him to.
You may know the answer to this one too.
Darren, did you have something?
Oh,
I
I'm
can
sorry.
shed a little light on that.
Okay.
We normally use Herb equipment out of Cape.
Uh-huh.
And they also charge mileage from their plants down to
Yeah.
us and back. So that's normally who Jim uses as well. So
Okay.
I don't, unless this is coming, maybe they couldn't repair it from the Cape facility, they had to send somebody from.
That could be
St. Louis.
too, yeah.
Typically, he uses the same people we do.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. There was a repair on the roof of, and Jim's not here, on the 20th Street roof station.
I could tell you about that if
Okay.
Yeah.
you'd like. I spoke with Jim about that today, and he said that the 20th Street lift station, that the roof there was at least 30 years old, because he knew it hadn't been repaired since he'd been working
Yeah,
here.
okay.
And that some guys got up on it, and it was real soft, and so it just simply
A
needed to
safety
be
issue.
tore off and
Yeah.
replaced.
Thank you. I didn't know if it was perhaps something that, like a storm damage of some sort that could be
No.
an
No,
interest.
it was not.
and it-
I was
he
wondering
did-
that same thing.
Yeah,
And he did get 2 bids on it, they were very close.
okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, any other questions on the bills? All right, well, the ones I had were all, I know that we have, and I asked this, I think, the first time after I got, first month after I was elected, 12 months after that, 12 months
Franchising
after
rent
that,
thing.
12 months after that. I never will totally understand the general fund
Franchising
transfers. I
rent.
know we do them, and I know that that's just how we do it in terms of moving money
Moving
around.
money, yeah.
But I guess as long as the auditor's fine with it, I'm fine with it. All right, any other questions on the bill? I entertain a motion to pay them.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, that takes us to our regular committee and commission reports. Up first is Budget and Finance, and in W.J. Pittman's absence, I will handle these items. I passed out in advance of the meeting a grant writing job description that I put together, and I would certainly entertain any revisions or amendments to it, because I put it together this afternoon amongst doing a couple other things, and so it could probably use some work. But there you have it, and if you want to review it and bring it back next meeting, be fine by me, or if so, somebody's always welcome to make a motion if they feel like it.
There is just one thing that may be in the hours requirement,
Mm-hmm.
and just to add that, give a monthly update.
I
think that's up
It's in here.
It
It
says
is in
it's
there.
in the
It's in
city
there.
council
Second
meeting. Then I
paragraph.
browsed too fast.
Yeah, it's under the bottom portion of essential job functions.
My question on that, though, Ms. Campos, is that, will that be, when they attend that meeting, or is that something they're gonna charge us, including the 20 hours, or not?
It's part of their job.
That's part of their job. I think it's a salary, not an hourly wage.
I agree.
Well, I would think that it would be, as the other aldermen have said, a part of their
Okay.
job requirements.
All right.
All right, well, if there's no other discussion on that and no motion, we can move forward and review it more at the next meeting.
That'd be
Is
great.
that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Great.
Mr. Urbis?
I think we probably need something, Richard, about it being an independent contractor, and we doesn't really say anything about
Well,
that.
yeah,
It says that
the
will,
way it's
but,
written is an at-will employee, it doesn't state that they're an independent contractor.
Right.
Okay.
With an independent contractor, they, you know, I guess here, they're taking specific direction from the city as an employee. I guess as a part-time employee, they're not entitled to any benefits under the.
Not at 20
There's no
hours.
part of the 20 hours.
Is there a boilerplate description, or is just simply inserting shall be an independent contractor sufficient? Or is there need to be a more robust description of what that means in this job description?
You want it to be an independent contractor.
Well, yes, but is that sufficient enough just to simply state that and
Well, I
nothing?
guess it's more so here is you're hiring it's set up as if you're hiring an employee.
I see, okay. So it needs to be sort
Contracting
of,
with an independent contractor, so we can draft some language just to put in there rather than, you know, if it's written, you're hiring an employee.
you wouldn't use the term salary, you wouldn't use the term salary or
Right.
that kind of
So it
thing.
wouldn't be a salary, that would be just their payment for.
a contracted amount.
Right.
Okay,
It would be similar, it would have some similar language in there as a contract we had worked out for Brian Hollow,
I see.
specifying that he's an independent contractor, not an employee of the city, not entitled to any benefits of the city. You know, this is just his would be that person's contract amount for performing his job.
Okay. Well, perhaps I can get with you between now and then, and we can hash out some of those, iron out some of those details. Okay.
Put in that, insert that language, the language where it's the hiring of employees.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, John. All right, we'll move on then to discussion regarding the agreement with the Village of Virgins. And I know that our last meeting, we had talked about whether or not that would be something that we would want to continue. If my memory serves me correctly, we had asked the legal counsel to review that and sort of report back about what our actual options were. So,
In reading of the contract, it's just a short two-page agreement. It's not, it does not provide a termination provision or an out for the city. It's a 40-year contract, the city's bound to, unless there is to be some major breach by Virgins under it. Right now, there's not. The city overbilled them, and they're just looking to get their money back from their overbilling. I know that the city knocked off a $5,000 amount sometime back.
Right.
How many years back did that go? Was it over
10.
10? And, you know, I don't think that is, and I don't think that's something that the city could pursue. it would be, that would be seen, the statute of limitation wise, that would be considered accounting, an action for the county, for amounts owed, which has a 5-year statute of limitations. So, you know, the city is stuck under this contract for the rest of its term.
I have, go ahead.
Ms. Hughes?
No, go
Can you tell me if both parties agreed to get out of that contract?
That's
and
fine.
It wouldn't be a
That's fine.
breach of contract.
That's
If
fine.
they
They
decided that they wanted to buy water wholesale from them, and we said, that's fine, we don't have to deal with it anymore, then we can get out of it. It's
Parties
just
can
if
agree to
we
get out of the
decide to get out of it on our own.
Yes.
Okay, thank
Ed
you.
is going to a meeting with Kincaid Conservancy District tomorrow. He was mentioning it to them, confirmed that they would be interested.
They're perfectly
in
willing
contract.
to take it over.
So if Virgins agrees with that, and Murphysboro agrees to, you know, let's part ways, you go buy your water directly from Kincaid, and that goes on.
It cost them 10 cents less a gallon. I mean, you'd think they'd be willing to, would want to do that, actually.
Well, I think the thing that they get out of it, of course, is that we've been doing a lot of maintenance.
Their maintenance for them.
And
At
so,
cost.
if,
And that's
The
our cost,
contract
too.
does say if any maintenance that they request to their distribution system, that they require, they're required to reimburse the city for. So I did have a question, what work does the city do? Is it to the city's point of getting the water to them, or is it part of their distribution system?
it's their distribution system.
Then, you know, it does provide where they request maintenance or repair to their distribution system, they're required to reimburse the city for.
Have they ever? Oh, okay.
But just cost.
Oh, okay. It's not,
Mr. Breton?
It's my understanding that when they call, that we go up and flush lines or blow out this, that, or whatever, or do repair on their lines for them. And basically, I think almost every time they've called, we've responded, and we did it at cost. So, I think we've tried to be a good neighbor, and hopefully they're trying to be a good neighbor, but they're not willing to negotiate any after showing any goodwill, after we showed goodwill of 5,000 here a few years in the past. I think we want to look at our cost factor and at least put a little bit of profit on there for replacement of stuff, this, that, and everything else. I mean,
well,
that's
they may
just-
be
that's just-
perfectly willing to get out of it, too. You
yeah,
don't know
and-
that.
And that's just good business, because I don't think we've got any allowance in there.
The contract would say the city's expenditures. I don't know if
So that is
the city
cost,
can add in
really.
a profit.
Yeah.
All right, well, I
Can't
think,
put anything there for contingency for equipment repair and replacement? I mean, I'm just asking. I certainly don't think we ought to double the building amount. I don't think that, but the one thing that a contingency fund has for every,
They
if you have one and you enact it and use it.
3,000, haven't they now?
they have,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, basically, they've been paid back now.
Well,
Anyway.
I think what we ought to do is, I think the council ought to advise our attorney to draft a letter to the Village of Virgins requesting that we, open a conversation with them about dissolving that contract. Because how many more years do we have left on it under this current?
Until
35?
2035. Yep.
35, yep.
I won't be around.
So until,
It was in
Well,
January
well,
10th, 1995.
and I mean,
40 years?
if we send a letter saying we'd like to dissolve this agreement and we'd like your village board to take up that for consideration and they approve
I don't know that
it.
we should say we want to dissolve the agreement, I think, because then they're going to say, that's a breach of contract. Well, wouldn't it be better to say, let's work together and try to dissolve it all at the same time? I don't know, I don't.
Well,
know
I'm
how
sure our
how the
attorneys can write it in
wording
such a
should
way
go.
that
You guys can do that, but
won't,
I don't want it to sound like we just want out of it. I think it should be an offer to let them out also.
Yeah, that they can purchase the water 10 cents cheaper. We won't put the maintenance
right.
part, you know,
Yeah.
they can do their own maintenance. And they can get a better price, purchasing the water directly from Kincaid. And Murphysboro would like to offer them a a way out if they wish to.
Well, and I think it's going to quickly become clear to them that, you know, hiring employees and maintaining and purchasing equipment and things of this nature isn't free. We know that here as we deal with it all the time. And so I hope, if nothing else, that gives them a little more clear-eyed view of what we've been doing for them over the years, and maybe a better appreciation for what we, you know, provide. So I think, well, of course, we haven't really made a motion at all, but and what exactly we want to say in that letter, I think, is that we want to, well, I would say dissolve, but it doesn't have to say that. We want to discuss, what's a better word than that? The
Ending the agreement with them if they're
Right.
interested in pursuing a
Yeah.
purchase directly with Kincaid.
right.
And maybe whenever we're considering that they say no, well, there will have to be a readjustment, and it's not that we're gonna be as a city making any profit, but we have expenditures as a city every year with our maintenance department, and purchasing vehicles and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And we're just per se passing them the cost of our hourly wages for our workers, and maybe the cost of the department might be included in the hourly wage.
Well, that can be, I think, a very relevant part of a conversation moving forward once we get the conversation started.
Yeah.
That, I think that's what I was getting ready to lead into, and somebody kind of started talking, so I just shut up. But
Oh,
no, that's fine, that's fine.
you're welcome.
Doesn't know how to put it on Bible. I say that, I know it's in my notes.
All right, so do we have a motion to direct our attorneys?
Do you need a motion, or can we just direct it?
Probably just direct.
I'll make a motion that the
I
attorney
second that.
contact by letter the Village of Virgins, offering them the ability to get out of that contract.
And I did second that.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we have no new business. Is there any public comment under items of a budget and finance nature? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next committee, which is chaired by Mr. Gary McComb, Building and Ground. Mr. McComb isn't here this evening. There are no items under old business. There is no new business. Is there any public comment regarding Building and Grounds? Hearing none, seeing none, we'll close out Building and Grounds and go into Community Relations, chaired by Mr. John Irvis. John?
All right, well, likewise, there's no old business or new business. Is there any public comment relating to community relations? That's all.
Okay, thank you very much, John. That takes us to Public Works, chaired by Alderman Dan Bratton. Mr. Bratton?
Do what now?
Public improvement.
Oh, excuse me.
Flipped it
Public
too fast.
improvement.
I read it wrong anyway. I thought the other one was under my committee, but
Excuse me. That takes us to Public Improvement, chaired by Mr. Mike Bastian. Mike?
Okay, there's no old business, there's no new business. Is there any public comment? Or the aldermen have any comments? With that being said, we'll move to Danny for Public Works.
Under old business, consideration of request to vacate an alley right-of-way off of Kennedy Street. Mr. McComb's absence, I spoke to him on the phone, and he has contacted Mr. Ridings. Mr. Ridings does want his half of that alleyway. I think that was the part that we needed, and I know that you need a little bit more than that to fit into the zoning. And like I told you before the meeting, if you'll get with Mr. Kennedy, he can walk you through if you need a variance because of your building there or whatever, what the procedures are. And but Mr. Wright, does want, because he's a joining neighbor, and that's the way we've already did it.
Mr. Blake, do you have something?
I was just going to point out, if there is going, we do not have enough council members here today to make the official vote to vacate the alley. It requires three-fourths vote, which would require 8.
Okay.
So to take official action, it couldn't be done tonight.
still.
I just have a question because I missed the meeting this all happened, and it's my understanding, I just read this letter this evening, and it indicated that Mr. Ridings did not, he was in agreement to give that to the landowner, Pete Spittler.
That's me. Well, basically, it expressed that he was not disputing my action to go and seek the vacation in the first place.
Oh, okay.
That's what that
Okay.
means.
Is that what that means? Okay,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, so I expressed to him my interest to say I would appreciate you, saying for that vacation, he said he would not dispute the request that I go and be interested in vacating the alley. That's what.
Okay, that's what that meant. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So-
Historically, we have always joining property owners divided it, so.
And some of them don't want it, and he could have
Correct.
said he can have all of it, you know, but.
Okay, under new business, consideration of modifying the street maintenance program overlay project.
I have just texted Jance. I know that she wasn't sure if she'd be able to make it tonight, but Mr. Blake, I assume if she would make it here before we conclude our business, that we could come back and act on this
On the alley vacation?
item.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know if she'll be able to make it or not, but if she is able to get here late, we could act
I'm
on
not
it.
going anywhere.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I think everybody received in their packet an estimate cost on these, and I'll just be honest with you, I think we agreed to do about 4 different things, but I don't remember which ones they were now.
I have them here in front of me, the ones that I believe we have a consensus on to do.
All of these?
No, there's really, I guess what I should say is what I would like to see us do.
Okay.
Is the estimate of cost for Bridgewood between 5th and Bridge Street, which is in the amount of $126,095.
Hold it.
So it's Bridgewood between 5th and Bridge.
I'm sorry, that's the one, that's that's what it costs, 106.
126.
Mine
Found
says
it, yeah.
Bridgewood south of Bridge Street, is that the one?
Bridgewood
Oh, here it
between
is.
5th and Bridge.
126, okay, I was looking
Yeah.
at the next one. Okay.
And then on 17th Street, Spruce to Oak, there is a small portion of concrete there that needs to be torn out and redone. And I believe, Harold, we had an estimate on that of somewhere between $6,000 and $10,000.
Yes. The options are maybe concrete or possibly put brick back in there.
So if you kind of split that down the middle and call it $8,000, instead of doing that whole street, if we just replace that one section, estimate about $8,000.
Yeah, I got it.
And that's from like Spruce down to Oak Street.
Well,
on
it's in
17th.
that section, there's a concrete
Yeah.
section that's always really bad and won't stay patched. The other is, of course, Shoemaker between 18th and 20th in the amount of $108,169.
That's the first one I got on page.
Shoemaker Road, 18th Street to 20th Street. $108,169.50. And then finally, the Hanson Street, 275 feet from 9th to 8th Street, and 100 feet from the edge of the intersection on 7th. That's in the amount of $69,452.70. And this sort of more specifically targets some areas there that are in bad shape. Previously, we had another estimate on Hanson Street that took in some areas that really didn't need it, although, and this sort of better targets that, I believe. And from my math, those together total just a little under $312,000, which was just under the monies that Scott Evans had said we would have available for these overlays in our motor
And then
fuel
they still
account.
have a little cushion
Right,
left.
right.
Good patch calls.
And the bridge one, Now, Valley Ridge was something completely different.
We got estimates both for Bridgewood and Valley Ridge. The streets in Valley Ridge are so bad that I didn't think that we could afford to do any of that right now. But I think next year when we come back and maybe, you know, look at what we can do, can't do, you know, it's gonna have to be done in stages down
Yeah.
there.
Also, just informational wise, I think they're getting ready to destroy some of those homes in there. They're gonna go every other one. I think they're not filled and they're not, and you may know about it. There's 10 or 11 of them, I thought, that they're going to take down.
Are those spread across Bridgewood and Valley Ridge, or just in Bridgewood? Or do you know, Alita?
I thought they were all in Valley Ridge, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I was at the meeting. I think there's 10 in Valley Ridge, and I think there's 3 proposed in Bridgewood, maybe.
Maybe.
I'm trying to remember, but the meeting's been a couple months ago or something like that.
Okay.
Anyway, I would, if you were going to recommend Valley Ridge, I was going to recommend that we maybe not do that until we see how many they're going to leave up there.
Sure. Well, the traffic count through Valley Ridge is, you know, still rather high.
Yeah,
So
and it may be whether there's any occupants or not. It may
Yeah.
just be a way down.
a lot of people connect down to
To Shoemaker that way.
Shoemaker to cut the old 13 to head into Carbondale. So, but no, this particular one is Bridgewood.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bratton?
Mayor, what was that total again that you calculated?
The total was $311,717.
Okay, do you need a motion on that, so I'll make it?
Okay, I will take that. We have a motion to approve these.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Do we have public comment? If not, we'll come out of Public Works and go to Public Safety.
All right, under Public Safety, chaired by Alderman Russell Brown. Russell?
Okay, on the old business discussion regarding must-heal abatement and water accumulation near 14th Street. Where on 14th Street is that by?
That was out at One Hot Cookie.
One Hot Cookie.
I can.
Which is out of the city limits, just north of that, and Eric called the health department for me, and they didn't really know if they could do anything about that or not.
I could speak to it a little bit.
Okay.
I met with Sarah from One Hot Cookie last week and talked to her about annexation inside the city limits, and talked to her about the agreement that we had worked up in terms of abating the city's portion of property tax for 5 years and then 50% for 5, and to help them with that consideration. And she said that she was open to doing that, that the business was owned by herself and also I think a couple other of her family members, and that she would have to get their approval, and that she would talk to them about it, and then that we would get back together again sometime before the end of this month and see if we couldn't work something out. I told her that the fact that that standing water was outside of city limits did certainly not make it any easier for us to try to, you know, help alleviate that in some way. Of course, I didn't promise anything, but I did talk to IDOT, and you know, Larry Reinhardt owns the storage units there on the west side of Sandra's shaking her head no, so he must not own them, but that's what that's what it says on the Jackson County map.
He owns the property north of those storage units. Reinhardt does.
Okay. He owns the actual drainage ditch? Okay.
That's on storage. He ran for alderman against Gary McComb, first time Gary ran 13 years ago.
Troy Raines?
Troy Raines. And I see a for sale sign there too.
Well, my question being, you know, when you look at that, when you're standing on Business Route 13, North 14th Street, and you're looking west, that drainage is, grown up and, certainly not channelized or anything. And I don't know if there is something that can be done under our ordinance to try to compel them to do something about it. Or who technically is supposed to even be maintaining that. If the city was, I don't know. Mr. Bratton.
Well, I think everybody knows that that strip of ground through there is just north of Suburban Drive, which I live on, so I can actually straddle my fence, and about 4 foot north of my fence is out of the city limits. When they went in there and started doing construction, before that, about a year before that, they went in and pushed out a bunch of trees. And what they did, they moved stuff around in there where there used to be a ditch that went through there. It no longer exists.
It was like a channel that the water could follow.
Correct.
And now then
And
it
the
just
city,
goes.
and the city actually even went out there and mowed that, tried to once or twice a year when it was dry enough, because we've got a water line or a drain line or something going through there. Since that happened, then she hired Bob Ellis Construction to come in and start building all that dirt up and whatever. I'm not putting that on Bob Ellis Construction, but it was never cleaned up or rechanneled, so that water just goes here and there in ponds. And of course, when I go out behind my fence and mow that part, I look and I still have water sitting there. I had it before today's rain out in the back, and it's...
Rained for a long time.
They changed the lay of the land.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
Now there's no drainage.
Now they have restricted the water flow through. Complicating that on the west side of North 14th Street, where Troy Raines or Reinhardt one owned, that drainage ditch has never been cleaned out. The state of Illinois came down through replacing culverts. They stopped short of that one. So, we've, it's a problem.
Richard, can the city compel maintenance of something like that owned by a private individual in the sake of, health and public safety to people that are inside city limits, like Suburban Drive, for instance, or whatever? I mean, I would at least think that it could be, that it's a nuisance.
We would have to check a little bit what the city options are. I guess it's are any of the because I guess which properties are on is it pushing water into on any of the city residents, on any city properties, or are they all, this is just an accumulation sitting outside of the city limits, is not affecting any actual city properties? Or, I guess, Dan, are you guys getting water further up onto your properties, or it's just they've got now this standing water on their property?
To be honest, I've had water up to the fence, 4 foot on my property, but I haven't saw that since they've been doing that. But just 50 feet from my property, there's water that sits and sits and sits there. So, I know when she came in for the enterprise zone, wanting us to vote on that to where she could get the tax abatement, she was going to put up a fence down through there and do this and that, which has never happened. But to answer your question, no.
Now, the city does have or does the city have a drainage easement going through there that they've obstructed?
I don't know.
Or we don't know?
But Larry Reinhardt's property is inside the city limits.
But I don't know that ditch that runs under the highway. I don't know if that's on Troy Raines' property or Larry Reinhardt's.
Part of it's on Larry Reinhardt's. I think initially it's right about the property line.
I think we could probably give you a better briefing at the next meeting if we could. The city has certain authorities not under, with 1.5 mile, it's not just zoning. The city has certain authority within, that distance to enforce their, the city's regulations as far as health and safety matters, as it would affect the city, to an extent. We can give you a much better idea if we just took a look at that authority.
Well, perhaps I should bring back a map that actually shows the property ownership to our next council meeting, and if you want to research a little bit onto what maybe would be applicable, then we can have a more informed discussion.
I mean, there's, the neighbor next door saw a bobcat out there and stuff, you just get, it's settled down now, but after they moved all that stuff around, we had large worms called snakes that we hadn't had before. But anyway.
Russell knows about that, huh?
That's what that's about.
Okay.
And I did have that put on there, Russell.
You just want to hold this to the next meeting, Mayor?
Yes, sir.
It's all on the whole business. On the new business, consideration to change the traffic, slow stop sign in North 9th Street. I don't know how you're gonna change them, you still got that hill there, wouldn't make any difference. I go that way every morning, and they claim that truck is blocking, I can see around the truck when I go that way taking the grandson to school.
We explored this a few months ago, and I went out and went door to door talking to the residents around there. First, to understand why the signs are set up that way. They're set up that way, I guess, because during the winter, if you pull up the hill from the old Rome, if you sit at a stop sign, you slide backwards in the cars. So that's why they made it through. The neighbors I talked to, none of them really saw a huge problem. I think there was one neighbor that had a problem, but I understand the historical context, and then talking to them, I don't know that there's any way we can change it. You can't open it up both ways, because then you're gonna have collisions, and if you put stop signs north and south on 9th, then when winter comes, you're gonna have people sliding backwards. So I don't, that's a weird intersection because it's offset, and there's no good solution there whatsoever.
Mr. Van Waring?
I drive that intersection probably twice a day for the last 25 years. And I can tell you that when you're westbound, it is almost always physically impossible to see northbound traffic on North 9th Street. Typically what happens is northbound traffic will stop and yield to east-west traffic that's already in the intersection. In my opinion, the idea that we're going to make an intersection unsafe 363 days a year for the 1 or 2 days that our roads are difficult to travel seems not very logical. I think a 4-way stop makes the most sense in that intersection. There are a lot of other stop signs on steeper grades at intersections in town. 6th and John Street is incredibly more steep than 9th and Illinois Avenue, and we've got a stop sign for east-west traffic there. I think as somebody that drives through it all the time, a 4-way stop makes the most sense there. That's typically what happens when north-south traffic meets east-west traffic there anyway. Simply because you can't see northbound traffic. So that, somebody that drives through it a lot, that's my opinion, for what it's worth.
Darren Mills, do you have any thoughts on it? I mean, you're one working the
I
streets.
agree with what Brian said as far as the traffic coming from the north. Because if you're headed west, you do have a hard time seeing them around the house. Headed east, it's not such a big deal, but I know you don't want to make it a 3-way stop. So you got to remain the same or stop off one way.
Didn't there used to be a stop sign on the north side, on the northbound lane? I mean, when I was growing up, you came from the Rome, you had to stop there.
It was the other way, and they switched it for a while.
Okay, all right. I thought
forth.
it used to be that way.
Any other thoughts, suggestions on it? Somebody want to make a motion? Leave it the
I make a
same?
motion to make a four-way stop.
I second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second to,
And Brian, that is what you meant, wasn't it? All four ways?
I
Yeah.
think that's the safest, yes.
Yeah.
And maybe
Well, and perhaps the 2 or 3 days a year it's bad, the city could make sure they put cinders on that a
A
little
lot of
more than normal.
cinders.
We don't have cinders anymore.
Or whatever they use, I don't know what they use, salt, whatever they use.
Use cinders.
Russell, this is your committee. I called the motion.
That's all right. All in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
Next thing on the new business, consideration of changing traffic flow on South 16th Street from Walnut to Spruce.
I put that on there, or asked that it be put on that. I've had several calls recently. That's the street from Walnut Street, you know, where Southern Barbecue is. It used to be Martha and Mary's, and then across the street there's a hairdressing place, a salon. That used to be a two-way street for a lot of years, and I don't know why. It was before I was on council when it was made one way, but I've had several calls recently asking why it's that way, and I said, I really don't know the reasoning behind it. We used to be able to turn there and go to Walnut Street from my house, you know, but I don't know what the reasoning is, why that's one way going south.
I agree, I just thought that the other day when I went by, I'm like, I've never heard the reason behind
It's
it all
really
these
funny,
years.
I've had three people in the last couple weeks that have just called and said, why is that like that? And I said, I don't know, I'll put it on the agenda.
maybe because it's a little bit narrow. I
There
don't know,
wasn't-
they had a lot of business with the dry
Oh,
cleaning.
yeah, there did used to be a
All
car
right,
wash
all right.
there and
One
a
at-
dry cleaner. Yeah.
One person at a
Yeah.
time. Russell, you said there used to be a car wash there?
Mhm.
And that was the reasoning for the one-way?
I think so.
That could very well be.
I
And now it's a
think-
parking lot.
And I think
Mr.
they're
Bastian?
right too with the dry cleaners, there,
Uh-huh.
like people pulling out of the alley. I
Yeah, they had
remember
a,
that.
they had a window at the dry
they
cleaner
did.
that you could pick up your dry cleaning, and you could only turn to the right because you couldn't see good enough to turn. That's probably when they did it for them. And I did forget there was a car wash.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if there's any good reason to keep it that way. Streets,
One of the ladies that owns the business asked me about it one day when I was spraying weed. I'd give her your name.
That's why I got and then I got two more after that.
Because I couldn't answer the question.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've lived in that area for a long time, since 1970, and it didn't used to be one way. When we first moved there, it's been that way for a good long time, but I don't know. I would entertain a motion if anybody wanted to open it up to two-way traffic.
I will second the motion, if that is a motion, that we open that to two-way traffic.
You would make that motion?
I will make that motion. I thought you did. Yes, I will make that.
No, I'm
Okay.
opening it up for a motion.
I'll second it.
And second?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
that you,
Push
Joe?
it.
Can I just add something into
Yeah.
discussion?
Hang on.
Because we have business on both sides of the street. Maybe with that, we need to put no parking in one side of the
Exactly.
street because
That
the
could be.
street, you know,
I don't know if that's,
it
what's
has to
Darren
be
say?
like that.
I was gonna mention that, because that's no
It's not
micro
real
in that
wide,
street.
It's
yeah.
not
You've got
wide.
cars parked on both sides, I don't know if you can get two cars.
No,
I don't know if you can either.
Can't.
Mr.
You
Bratton?
could have parking on just one side, though.
exactly.
Mr. Bratton?
Okay. All right, if you turn off of Walnut Street, and go south, on your right-hand side, there's parking there for
Yes.
the beauty salon.
Yes,
Then there's an alley, and then there's a parking lot.
yes.
Where the alley is, on the east side, are apartments, and those people park in front there. So you've got a zigzag. So it's not a good situation there either.
Oh, I
For
see what
parking,
you're
you
saying.
mean?
Yes.
But if we
I see.
make it one parking on one side, it would.
If you put parking on one side, you're either gonna hurt the beauty
But-
salon,
but
or,
when People park
Mr.
on
Bratton,
that right side.
If we could have one
I'm
person
sorry, I
speak
apologize.
at a time. Mr. Bratton?
all right, if you put parking only on the west side, then Southern Q parking in the back, and those apartments won't have a place to park, because they can't park in front of the parking lot or the alley. So it's, I think, I agree, it would be nice if it was two ways, but we gotta figure out which is less of the two evils. because you don't want to hurt the beauty salon, you don't want to hurt Southern Q and the apartment place. And the parking there is grandfathered in before we had the zoning where you had to have 1.5 parking spaces per unit.
Ms. Hughes?
Okay, now, I have seen people, if they're coming from Walnut Street, parking, heading south, right beside Southern Q. You know, it would be that direction. And also on the other side where the salon is. They park double on that now, but they're all headed south. Yes. I mean, that's, you can park on either side now. It just happens to be on, all of it's headed south.
Mr. Bratton?
One way.
Chief Swafford,
Yes, sir.
you got the biggest rig in town.
Yeah. Oh,
You got cars on both sides of the street, and you gotta get your big fire truck down through there.
Yeah, I've noticed I've had problems on down farther south 16 when
Oh,
you
well,
park on
yeah.
both sides and you got other traffic coming.
Yeah.
We had a weasel through there before, it was
Mhm.
pretty tight. So, yeah, I can see where you're coming. If you
Yeah.
do two-way, it's gonna be hard to have parking on both sides and meet oncoming traffic.
Ms. Campos, did you have something?
No, I just brought that the parking situation into the two-way street zone.
Yeah, that's.
And there is a reason, I
But-
guess, that why is one way.
Is it any more narrow than almost, I just don't know, is it any more narrow? I mean, it's not like that little teeny tiny street down there by Bobby's house, but is it any more narrow than any of those other streets down in the historic preservation area? I just don't know.
Well, it's certainly a narrow street. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not
we know that.
20th by any stretch of the imagination. So we have a motion and a second. Is that,
Can I say something, please?
Mr. Bastian,
After
yeah.
further discussion with that, I was not looking at the parking
wasn't
situation, and I
either, really.
appreciate Alderman Bratton bringing that to my attention. It is narrow, and with that being said, in that discussion that we had, I will withdraw my motion to make that a.
Okay.
Draw my second.
Okay. All right, well, is there any further discussion on changing the traffic flow there?
I don't have any, I was just bringing it because I
No,
had 3
that's-
calls.
Yeah.
Well, it's because it's narrow.
That's right.
That's true, yeah.
I still don't know what to tell them why we're not doing
Because
it.
it's narrow.
Right.
But that's all right. Go ahead, Russ.
Leave it
There
like
is
it
a
is.
Mr. Urbis?
There is a difference, Barb, because if you have a two-way and you have traffic on both sides, and
Yeah.
now it's only
I
one way, so
understand that, yeah.
that is less.
Yeah.
I agree.
You want to leave it like it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Failed
so.
for lack of a motion, I guess.
Oh, yeah, I think it died for lack of a motion, which is fine.
It's all in the new business. Public comments.
Ms.
I
Campos?
Thank you. And there has been a couple of situations that they brought up to my attention, and that is with public safety. And I know this past weekend they slashed the 4 tires at Business Services Supply here in Murphysboro. And then on Suburban Drive, also there was a robbery. And I was asked straight why we only have 2 police officers at night, and I said, that must be a misunderstanding. We cannot have just 2 police officers. And I
Up
said,
until I came, from 3 to 7 a.m., we only had 1 police officer in house.
well, it happened that in my neighborhood and a little bit, we have been really hard, hit really hard with robberies.
We caught the kids that were slashing the tires. We caught them. We ran a search warrant and are confident that the people who did the burglaries on Suburban Drive on Wednesday night, one is now locked up in Benton and one is locked up in Jackson County. But at most times, we have 2 officers on. Now during our high times, we have 3 or 4 on. But our call schedule, I'll be honest, last night between midnight and 7 a.m., we had 3 calls for service. During the daytime, between 11 a.m. and 6 p.m., we'll have upwards of 20 to 30 calls for service. So there's a massive difference in calls for service, and we have to staff based on what the calls for service are. If we've got fights going on in the middle of the street, in the middle of the day, we have to have enough officers to answer that. And most days, even with heavy staffing, with me taking calls, the lieutenant taking calls, and the investigators taking calls, usually we're still staffed pretty tight as far as not having anybody available. So we moved from one officer on from 3 to 7 a.m. to 2 officers on at all times when I took over. So we doubled that coverage at night. But we have a very, very high call volume between about 10 a.m. and about 7 p.m. We have a very high call volume, especially 11 and 5. So it becomes a resource management issue.
Yeah.
You know, do I not answer? I'll give you an example. I pulled off a 14th the other day to go check on some officers on the floor, and I had 2 people fighting in the middle of Walnut in front of the Amstar, and one of them had dope, and they're swinging on each other. So do I pull people off of patrol during the middle of the day when our population is 3 times its normal size and put them on night when I have very low call volume, or do I keep them on when our calls for service are really high?
I understand, it is just that lately, and you know that, Chief.
I mean,
but we have been hit.
I have personally talked to every victim I could get a hold of that had their tires slashed. I called them myself. Suburban Drive, I called the victims after we ran the search warrants on Maple. It very much troubles me. I mean, ideally, I'd like to have 5 or 6 officers on at all times, but we just can't do that with our call volume.
Mr. Bastian?
I have a question, talking about the burglaries. How about the, you've caught them, how about the ones that are breaking into the cars? Have you caught or narrowed it down or?
We've narrowed it down. We really, based on accomplice statements from the search warrant we ran on Maple Street, we believe that those 2 particular brothers were going out pretty much every night, and everything they could find unlocked they were stealing from. And Wednesday night, 2 weeks ago, we had the Suburban Drive burglaries. That Friday morning, I wrote a search warrant off an interview I did on somebody, and we ran a search warrant on Maple Drive. And we haven't had any burglaries or car burglaries since then. But burglars, we stop one and another group pops up.
Right. Has any of the fingerprints they've taken off of the cars, have they matched up?
Fingerprints take months and months from.
They said it'd be at least 9 months. So I was just curious because I got.
Yeah, I think when fingerprints come back, we'll clear a number, hopefully, but fingerprints take anywhere from 6 to 9 months.
That's what I heard. Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Bastian. Ms. Campos, anybody else?
TV in 3 minutes or less.
We have to go to the crime lab.
I will say, we, on that crime scene, we just sent 5 officers to the 3-day crime scene processing school. That's something we have not done well in the past, is training officers. And they went to the advanced school, which should improve what we do at the scene. Giving those officers those hands-on skills and that training that we haven't given before should help us in processing scenes. We're trying to beef up their education, trying to beef up their training as far as our abilities.
Good.
All right, that takes us out of public safety. We can go to personnel, chaired by Ms. Barbara Hughes. Barb?
Yes, there's no old business that I'm aware of. Under new business, Sandra asked that this be put on there. There is a staff training for the Locust system that is going to be in Fairfield, is that correct? Which is the closest we could find it. It would be really good for all 4 of them to be there for the Locust training. They are requesting that they would like to close the office on September 17th. That's a Monday.
Sandra, do you want to speak to this any?
There is training that would allow just 2 and 2 to go. I feel like it is beneficial if all 4 of us go so that we can feed off of each other and some of the things that'll be discussed at the meeting. So the one day where all of us go is my preferred. I think it would be beneficial to the staff.
Okay.
We did it last year, so.
I think it was
Maybe 2 years ago.
Couple of years back.
Yeah, we did close down for one day for them
Yeah,
to go.
so I would like to make a motion to close the office so the staff can attend that training.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Ms. Sandra, you need to get them registered. Is there any public comment on personnel?
I think Mr. Bratton has some.
Yes.
Can I make a suggestion that we put a notice in the water bills about it?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And perhaps,
That's a
do
real
you
good
still
one.
use the billboard sign? Perhaps you could put it on that as well.
Yeah, that would be good.
You know,
I could
close-
put it
And
out
on
on
the
the
doors.
text messaging service also.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be real good.
Okay, that, is that everything, Ms. Hughes?
I think so. There's no public comment.
Okay.
We can come out of them.
That takes us to the mayor's report. Keep an executive session there, but I have no reason to go into it this evening. I will mention that we got good coverage in the Southern about the Perwood plant transfer, and tomorrow Solar Alliance is putting out their own press release about it, which is going to include some new information about another company that they're partnering with already to fill up more space there. And believe it or not, William Shatner is going to be interviewing with the Chicago Tribune and with the Southern and with Channel 12 tomorrow about the project, tomorrow afternoon. So he'll be talking about Murphysboro, and so that'll be a unique thing. And so that continues to move along. All right, that's everything I have there, so we'll go to council member requests. We'll go to Ms. Hughes.
Yes, Chief, you and I had talked about active shooter trainings, and talking with some of the employees and supervisors and foremen and such. Is there any way that you could do a class at admin and also at code office?
Yeah, actually, when I went and got certified, I sent Sandra an email offering it. I've probably done about 500 or 600 citizens so far.
Yeah, I knew you had,
So,
but if we could do those two offices, I think it would just be of good help, great
Yeah.
help to our
that's not a
employees.
problem. I'll get with Sandra and try to schedule the time.
Thank you. In this day and time, when they need all the opportunity they can to learn what to do.
All right, anything further?
No.
Okay, Mr. Brown?
Nothing.
Mr. Voss?
Nothing tonight.
All right, Mr. Urbis?
Nothing tonight.
Mr. Bratton?
The heat and air conditioning new unit is up and running. You approved the bill tonight for the senior citizens. That's all I have.
Mr. Bastian?
I have nothing.
Ms. Campos?
Not tonight.
Clerk Hunziker? Okay. Attorney Blake? Ms. Ripley? Mr. Sheffer? Chief Swafford?
I hope to have the hydrants completed by the end of the month, and tonight if you go out, they may be trying to flow Mullen Street and Jackson Square this evening.
Okay.
Get done with no traffic. And we did participate with some training with Carbondale Fire last week. Did 3 night drills over at the Regional Training Center, and it was real good training for everybody.
Very good. I would note that we did get, I think, a total of 9 applications in for fire chief. With Mr. Swafford's pending retirement at the end of the year. Those applications are being reviewed. I asked for background checks to be ran on them. I know the police department will complete that, and Chief Swafford is going through them as well to give his recommendations. So we'll look to do some interviews there probably in the next month or so, would be my guess. All right, anything further, Chief Swafford?
No.
Chief Roberts?
I've been working with Ben Reed, who's the city attorney that does our prosecution, and we've been trying to beef up our city adjudication process. And we have figured out a way to actually issue city arrest warrants for offenses committed against the code or ordinance violations. To kind of explain to you, right now, unless we can hand a ticket to somebody and take them into custody, you know, if we have a theft that we solve and we know John Doe did it, John Doe's no longer in Murphysboro, we have to hope we run across John Doe one day, do a ticket, put him in jail. Now we've actually come up with a warrant process, just like county warrants, and code can use it, fire can use it, any ordinance violation. We can actually swear out a warrant, we send it to Ben Reed, he sends it to the court. The court will issue the warrant, put it in MCIC, and I've got it set up so that if they're caught in any county surrounding Jackson, they'll actually come back, they'll be brought back to the jail to answer in court. The good thing about that is we've really beefed up our ordinance enforcement and moved stuff away from state court back over to city court for a number of reasons. Way beyond the revenue thing, because I'm not that's not a driver for me, but we get more control with having it in state court, and this just gives us a greater tool. It's also a tool to help Eric and Swafford, because it'll apply to everything in our code of ordinances. Actually gives us a more, Ben did a good job on it, because I figured there was a way to do it, and Ben did quite a bit of research and figured it out, and we developed the form and process for it.
Thank you very much. Anything further?
No, sir.
Okay. Mr. Manwaring?
Nothing.
Mr. Mills?
Nothing.
Eric Kennedy? All right. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Indeed.
Thank you.
He